For about 76 years, we had Pluto all figured out. Or at least, we thought we did. It was right there in our textbooks, on our classroom walls. It was our ninth planet, a familiar, distant friend at the edge of our cosmic neighborhood.
And then, boom. In 2006, we just took away its planetary status. The International Astronomical Union decided to call it a dwarf planet. And honestly, for most of us, that's where the story ended. Pluto just kind of faded from the conversation, became more of a trivia question than a world.
Yeah, the general idea was pretty simple. Pluto was this small, frozen rock way out in the dark, demoted, forgotten, and probably not doing anything interesting at all. Just a relic. And that's the picture of Pluto most of us still have in our heads.
But what if that whole picture, what if it's almost completely and totally false? Because here's the thing. While we were all down here arguing about what to call it, Pluto was busy being one of the most geologically violent, complex, and scientifically baffling places we have ever seen.
That's right. I want you to think of it like that, a cosmic cold case. It's a world we basically left for dead, only to find out years later that we had missed every single clue. So today, let's be the detectives. Let's reopen the file on Pluto.
So, every good investigation starts with the official story, right? This is the version of Pluto that was the scientific consensus before our detectives showed up in 2015. This was the world everyone thought they knew.
The myth was simple, a world that was geologically inert, frozen solid billions of years ago. The reality, as we're about to see, is a world that is shockingly, almost impossibly alive. And that's the central mystery we're investigating today.
And look, you can't blame scientists for this dead world theory. The reasoning was totally solid. It's so far from the sun that its surface is cold enough to freeze nitrogen solid. We're talking negative 230 degrees Celsius. Plus, it's tiny, smaller than our own moon. Every model we had screamed the same thing. This place should be a frozen, dead ball of ice. Case closed. But then, after a 9.5-year journey across the entire solar system, the detective finally arrived on the scene. The New Horizons probe, our investigator, was about to blow this case wide open.
And you have to appreciate the incredible challenge here. New Horizons was screaming past Pluto at almost 50,000 kilometers an hour. It couldn't slow down. It couldn't stop to orbit. It had one chance, a tiny window of just a few hours, to grab all the evidence it could before it vanished into deep space forever. No pressure, right?
And the evidence it sent back? Wow. Over the next 15 months, as the data trickled in, it started to completely dismantle that old story of a dead Pluto. It was time to look at the clues.
Okay, the first piece of evidence, and it's a showstopper. Sputnik Planitia. It's this huge, heart-shaped plain of nitrogen ice. And the first thing scientists noticed? It has basically no craters. That means the surface is brand new, geologically speaking. And the reason why is just nuts. The ice is actually churning, like a lava lamp in super slow motion. Warmer ice rises from below, spreads out, cools off, and sinks back down, constantly erasing the surface.
Which, of course, led to the single biggest question of the whole investigation. To make ice churn, you need heat. But a tiny world like Pluto should have lost all its internal heat eons ago. The math just did not add up. And yet the evidence was right there.
And the clues just kept piling up. New Horizons found these enormous mountain ranges, some taller than the Rocky Mountains. But here's the twist. They're not made of rock. They're made of water ice. Yeah, good old H2O. At Pluto's temperatures, water ice is literally as hard as granite. Something was actively building mountains on this supposedly dead world. And it's not just mountains. Pluto has active glaciers. But again, forget what you know. These aren't water ice. They're rivers of solid nitrogen, flowing down from the highlands, carving channels, and reshaping the entire landscape. It's wild.
And then there was this thing, Wright Mons, which looks suspiciously like a volcano. Scientists think it's a cryovolcano, an ice volcano. It doesn't erupt molten rock, it erupts a slushy mix of water ice and ammonia. And the ground around it looks so young that it might have erupted in the relatively recent past. An ice volcano on a world that shouldn't have enough energy to do much of anything?
So the surface itself was already baffling enough, but the plot just kept getting thicker. New Horizons looked up and realized Pluto has this complex, impossible atmosphere. As the spacecraft flew past, it looked back and saw the sun setting behind Pluto, and the atmosphere was glowing with layers of blue haze. That blue color comes from something called tholins.
They're complex organic molecules that form way up in the atmosphere. Then they drift down, painting the surface in that reddish color. Think about that for a second. On Pluto, the building blocks of chemistry literally rain out of a blue sky.
And this atmosphere is incredibly dynamic. Over its really long 248-year orbit, Pluto basically breathes. As it gets closer to the Sun, some of its surface ice turns to gas, and the atmosphere inhales, getting thicker. Then, as it moves away, the whole atmosphere freezes and collapses back down onto the surface. It exhales.
But maybe the biggest atmospheric shock of all was this: dunes. Actual dunes, made of methane ice, sculpted by wind. Now, that should be completely impossible in an atmosphere 100,000 times thinner than Earth's. It turns out Pluto invented a whole new kind of weather, where nitrogen ice on the surface puffs directly into gas, kicking up these methane grains just enough for the faint winds to push them around. A world with almost no air has wind.
So we've got geology, we've got complex chemistry, we've got weather. But the final clue, the deepest secret of all, suggests that buried underneath everything is Pluto's biggest surprise yet.
So here's the final piece of the puzzle. Gravity data shows there's a huge mass of something really dense hiding right under that icy heart. And the best explanation that fits all the data? A liquid water ocean, kept from freezing all this time by ammonia acting as a natural antifreeze. Scientists think it's been insulated by this slushy layer of gas and ice, keeping it liquid for billions of years. I mean, the implication is just staggering. In total darkness, powered by some faint internal heat, Pluto might be hiding one of the oldest, largest oceans in our entire solar system.
So, what's the verdict in the cold case of Pluto? The defendant we accused of being cold, dead, and boring is in fact one of the most dynamic and complex worlds we've ever had the privilege to see. The old story is finished, for sure, but the new one is just beginning.
You know, in the end, that whole argument about whether Pluto is a planet, it was always a bit of a distraction from the real mystery, wasn't it? The data from New Horizons made one thing crystal clear. What we call it is totally irrelevant. What matters is what it is. And what it is a world that is actively rewriting the rules of how planets are supposed to work. And that leaves us with one last, kind of unsettling thought. Pluto was supposed to be the boring one, the template for thousands of other icy objects out there in the Kuiper Belt. But if the very first one we visited turned out to be this extraordinary, what other secrets are hiding out there in the dark? We've barely scratched the surface, and the darkest corners of our solar system are already proving to be way more alive than we ever imagined.